On DAB Digital Radio and 1089 and 1053 AM. Extra Time with Mike Graham on Talk Sport.
I'm delighted to say that Mr. Mike Porky Parry has joined me to analyse not only the weekend's events, all to do with football and much else besides, but he's also going to take a what can only be described as a medical look, I suppose, or a forensic look at the tears of footballers, because we've seen John Terry, a very hard man, weeping on Sunday when Chelsea couldn't manage to get any sort of goals out of Norwich at all, a team that are going down in the Championship. And Luis Suarez last night, very different kind of tears, kind of holding his face in his hands.
First of all, can I say good morning, Mike?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for welcoming me onto your show before,
I'm a bit frazzled.
before you decide to sort of just, steam on
I'm
and
a bit
regard
frazzled,
me as a
frankly.
kind of passenger who's just sort of jumped on
I must apologise for that.
Thank you
I
very much
must apologise for that.
indeed.
You're quite right. I was quite rude in not saying good morning
Yeah,
first.
yeah, well, good morning.
Well, I'm so
okay.
excited to see you,
Well,
because I haven't seen you since Friday morning.
Can't blame you for that.
And the point is that, I've been frazzled, which I'll tell you about later. My train journey up here today was the worst one ever. It was just horrendous.
We'll get on to that in a minute, because I've got a few transport problems of my own. On the footballers crying,
Yes.
Mike, you're absolutely right, because I want to tell you really about the big issue which is worrying me over the weekend. That's the disappearance of sheep in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people are going to say, oh, what on earth is Porky rambling on about
They
now?
have been saying that.
But it's a massively serious issue which
it?
affects the whole ecology of this country
Okay.
and perhaps beyond. And so we'll get on to that in a minute. But you're right to focus on the sporting events tonight. Firstly, Ronnie O'Sullivan, we've just heard in the latest news bulletin there that the winner of the World Snooker title is saying, well, Ronnie O'Sullivan beat me, but he's still the greatest in the world.
Yeah.
I got into a bit of trouble last week when I said, well, was Ayrton Senna the greatest racing driver ever, when the figures show that he didn't actually win?
When people said that he was. But I mean, Ronnie O'Sullivan still is the greatest player in the world,
Well,
isn't
he's not according to the figures, because even if he'd won tonight, he would only have equalled Steve Davis's record of total of 6.
Right.
And he's still now 2 away from Stephen Hendry's record
but he
of
hasn't
7.
finished playing yet, has he?
Well, I don't know, because you see, this is very, very interesting. Ronnie O'Sullivan
He's a bit mercurial, isn't he, Mr. O'Sullivan?
Exactly, can only play when his head's in the right place, okay? Is his head in the right place? If he lost this one, he went off and saw old Steve, what's his name?
Steve Peters.
Steve Peters, there you go. So you thought, well, that'll get him back on.
This is the psychological genius who supposedly is going to help England not miss penalties, right?
Well, you said that in slightly mocking terms,
No,
but
I didn't.
he is regarded within the sporting industry as being a real, wizard.
Is he not the same guy
with
who's
the
been
minds.
working with Stephen Gerrard as well?
Yes, he is, yeah. And I saw another guy called Bill somebody, not Beaumont, who used to work with Steve McLaren, and he's going on about the growth of sporting psychology. But look, we're getting off the subject.
You're going all over the place here. We're talking about footballers that cry,
Yes,
surely.
that's right. Now, the thing is, do we know if Luis Suarez was crying? And by the way...
Well, you make a very good point, because all we can see in the pictures on the back pages is his face completely covered up. We're looking at this one in the mirror, where he's literally holding his what looks like his shirt over his face.
Yeah.
And at no
He's got
point...
his hands over his
and
face.
his hands as well.
Stephen Gerrard.
At no point do you actually see his face with tears coming down, whereas with John Terry, he's quite bold about it. He's quite happy to see people seeing him cry.
Now, the thing is, the reason I mention it is not because I have any argument or issue with men who cry. I think it's probably a fantastic indication of how dedicated these guys are to the cause and the will to win.
And how seriously they take it all.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say to you was, Mike, I have never cried. Certainly not as an adult. So
That's because you haven't got a heart.
No.
Quite literally.
No, I've got 1/3 of a heart.
Right.
Compared to the heart you've got,
But you're quite. I mean, this was pointed out to you last week. It was, in fact, when you were talking about Ayrton Senna, that you accuse me quite often of having no compassion. You're really the guy with no compassion.
No, I've got
completely
compassion
from the beginning. You've got compassion for like ducks and things like that.
No.
But you haven't got compassion really for your fellow man.
Yes, I have. Honestly, I have. It's just that I've never cried. Nothing that's happened to me has reduced me to tears.
You must have cried as a child.
Well, maybe I did as a child,
In
but it's
pain?
so far. No, not in pain. It's so far back on. Maybe in frustration.
Yeah.
I remember once I did cry when I didn't win the reading prize at the King's School Chester. No, seriously, I was really upset.
What age were you then?
8. And I had.
I can't imagine you as a child.
No, I
just can't imagine.
I had the most beautiful voice, and I was reading a piece from a Lewis Carroll book, and I thought I'd walk away with it. I mean, everybody told me what a great voice I had, beautiful accent I had.
What?
My delivery was perfect.
Who was telling you all this rubbish?
Oh, like teachers and people.
Sure, it wasn't just your mother.
No.
Mothers always lie to their children to make them feel better.
No. My mother's from Birkenhead and sounds like she's from Birkenhead.
Right.
My voice had developed into a cultured Cheshire accent.
Oh, really?
In
Is that what it
those
is
days.
now?
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah. And I remember I was up against a boy called David Lewis. I'll never forget him because he beat me and I hated him ever since. But fortunately, he wasn't bright enough to pass the exam to get to the senior school.
You don't think there's anything wrong with that, do you?
What?
If somebody beats you for a reading prize at the age of 8, you've hated him ever since.
I've hated him ever since.
Have you ever seen him again?
No, because I say he wasn't bright enough to get into senior school. He left at 8, and became one of at 11.
That's not normal.
Sorry, 11 became one of the world's great unwashed, and I've never had to cross his path since.
It's not normal.
So it's not a problem.
So you've never cried as a result of a relationship breaking up? You've never cried as a result of a terrible career disappointment? You've never sat at home with your head in your hands thinking, it's all over for me?
No.
Really?
No.
I'm staggered that you've never thought that.
I've had relationships break up, and yes, it's been painful of the heart, and you get envy and jealousy.
Did you not lie there in the bed at one point thinking, I could actually physically die here?
No.
And you could then burst into tears.
No.
Genuinely.
No. Listen, the worst thing that's happened to me as an adult is my dad died, and that was over 30 years ago.
You didn't cry then?
But no, I didn't, because I felt I had to be strong for the family. I then became the head of the family.
Yeah, but in a private moment,
I've got 2 sisters and a mother, and there was a lot of grief about at the time. You can't afford to be bursting into tears all over the place. So you've got to be resolute.
I actually cried last night, funnily enough.
Why?
I was watching a thing on TV. Which was really quite upsetting.
What was it?
It's a thing called War Generation. I don't know if you've seen it. It's an amazing. It's a drama. It's actually a German drama. The second part of it was on it. It's about these five friends basically during the Second World War, and 2 of them get off and sent off to the Russian front. One of them becomes a singer. Another one happens to be Jewish and gets sent to the camps. I mean, it's incredibly powerful drama and so upsetting that I had tears in my eyes.
No, I don't get like that at all.
You don't cry at film?
No, I don't. I mean, I even suspect I may have no tear ducts. I think they may have may be gone or been blocked up or something.
Maybe you're evolving into a new kind of human.
No.
Because, if you don't use, like people say, if you don't, in times to come, people won't have tonsils. They won't be born with an appendix.
Well, there you
go.
go.
You don't really need them. Maybe
there
you're the first of a new breed of human that doesn't actually have tear ducts.
But that emotion to start crying has never hit me, you see what I mean? And we're going through it, my dear old dad died, and obviously it was very sad, but I felt I had to be resolute. Never cried in a breakup of a relationship, ever.
I'm not surprised at that.
Yeah, sometimes the job has been, difficult enough. Challenging, can drive you to tears, and there have been low times. But I haven't cried, because I do feel... for myself, it would be a sign of...
weakness.
Yes, weakness is giving in.
This is part of your bizarre psyche, though,
no,
isn't it?
but I do not think that of John Terry and Luis Suarez. In my mind, it was the sheer frustration of wanting to succeed so badly, and I do like winners. And
here's another picture, but I'm
winners.
very interested in your thesis that possibly, Luis Suarez isn't actually crying.
Yeah.
Because you don't see his face.
No, you don't.
The only place where there's a picture of him actually full frontal, as it were, is on the front of the Telegraph.
Yeah, I've seen
where
that.
he's kind of screeching up his eyes. What do you call that?
Scrunching.
Scrunching up his
Somebody's eyes. And putting his rather protruding teeth out, and it's a kind of, what have I done?
I mean, it would be unkind to say that you can't help noticing his teeth there, because obviously, you notice his teeth. But, I mean, it doesn't look like he's crying to me.
No, it doesn't look like he's crying to me, and he puts his shirt over his head. Now, could it just be that he'd given himself an ultimatum? Win the Premier League title with Liverpool, you stay.
Yeah.
Don't win the Premier League title with Liverpool, maybe there are offers in the air. We all know where the offer's coming from.
You do wonder about that, don't
Well,
you?
you have to wonder. I'm not being unkind or cruel now to Liverpool fans. I've been very generous in my praise for Liverpool this season, and I've said if they won the title, then you'd have to wish them all the best because they were the best team. It doesn't look like they're going to do it now. But I've got nothing against Liverpool or Luis Suarez, but I do think that the way Real Madrid are emerging, although Madrid are going to have a struggle to win that La Liga title, aren't they?
Yeah, it looks that way.
Still.
Yeah, but they could win the Champions League, though, couldn't they?
Well, I was about to say,
for a few years.
Atletico Madrid could win the domestic title, and Real Madrid could win the Champions League.
That's how it's pronounced. Do you know the last time Real Madrid won the Champions League, I was at the game. At Hampton Park.
Yeah, I was as well.
Were you?
I was, and we stayed.
Why didn't you call me?
Well, I didn't know you were there, did I? I tell you where we
didn't know I was
stayed.
there. I was living in Glasgow.
We stayed in the Something George Hotel on the square.
George Square.
George Square, is it? Yeah. What's the hotel called?
Well, there's about 3 hotels on the square itself. There's an Omni there. Was it an Omni?
No. This is the Carlton George.
Oh, okay.
And I tell you what, it's a fantastic hotel because it's a gentleman's hotel, and each bedroom is a suite. But on the top floor, they have a gentleman's lounge, and you go in, and there's televisions and all that kind of stuff.
Glasgow's full of gentlemen, isn't it?
No, well, you can actually smoke a cigar in there for some strange reason. They've got some bylaw.
Okay.
But when you go in and you sit down, the newspapers are all there, Financial Times and all that, and on the what I can only call the sideboard, there are decanters of whiskey and brandy and
it's
sherry.
one of those trust bars.
You just help yourself. I mean, it's
you're supposed to note down what you've drunk, though.
No, you're not. You're not actually.
Yeah, you are.
Well, are you?
That's
Well,
called
I
a
never
trust
did.
bar.
Well, you're
not supposed to just drink it and not pay for it.
I went in there with Mr. Brazil for a couple of hours one night. So
if you invited, I imagine the hotel's gone out of business. But I mean,
That's
surely
a bit
the point. No, the point is that it's a trust bar. They have those down here as well. But you're supposed to write in a book if you're staying in the hotel, and they just add it to your bill.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
So you just.
Oh well, I just thought it was like they liked having me there, so they made the facilities available to me.
That was not entirely well. Now we must get on to this missing sheep story, but we haven't got any time right now. We're going to talk about it next. Coming up with Mike Porky Parry, he's going to tell us why he's worried that so many sheep are disappearing from this country. This is Talk Sport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. Together we are the two Mikes. There will be an iTunes podcast coming out a little bit later on. Balder the Brave has sent this in as a tweet on social media. Now you say you're lonely. You cried the whole night through. Well, you can cry me a river. Cry me a river. I cried a river over you. I think he's saying that for Liverpool fans.
Yeah, where's that from then?
It's from a song called Cry Me a River.
Oh, yeah, who sung that?
Justin Timberlake.
Oh, really? Did he write that song?
I don't know if he wrote it, but
because those lyrics are quite good.
Yeah, well, he probably did.
It sounds like
I'm being told Pharrell Williams wrote it.
Who's Pharrell Williams?
Pharrell Williams is a sort of producer, Svengali type music star.
I was going to say it sounded like.
I think he's got 4 top 10 songs in at the charts at the moment.
Is he? That sounded to me like some poet from like the 1930s or something. But anyway, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. There we go, Pharrell Williams.
Anyway, you've never cried, but you might be slightly concerned, however.
Yeah.
Or some tears might be. So are you saying that tears have never actually welled up in your eyes?
No, seriously, I've not.
There might be something wrong with you.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe my tear ducts have gone or something like that, but nothing. I mean, the closest I sort of came to thinking. I mean, I have sometimes thought I want to cry.
Yeah.
I wish I could cry. I'd like to express sorrow and despair and unhappiness. I want to cry, but I never cry. Really? It's as simple as that.
Because you know what they say to actors is normally they say to them, think of the saddest thing that's ever happened in your life, and they can start crying like almost on cue.
I'm quite lucky that nothing horribly sad has happened. Well, obviously my father died, and that's very sad. And I was given 36 hours to live when my heart exploded, which is quite sad. Some
people would say that's quite a good reason to be mournful.
No, I never once did I, during the old heart trauma, think about crying. But anyway, listen, I want to tell you about these sheep.
Because you're very worried about these.
Yeah. And now
I can't believe that the entire nation is actually waiting for this story.
Oh, yeah, they are.
When I sent a message out on social media earlier, people are really interested to know why the sheep are disappearing.
I'll tell you why. Where do you think the word spinster comes from?
Spinster?
Yeah, spinster, a woman who has never got married.
Yeah, I know.
Now, I'm a bachelor, right?
Yeah.
I'm a man who never got married.
Yeah.
A spinster woman. Do you know where it comes from?
I don't know.
It comes from the fact that sheep was the most dominant industry in the world in the Middle Ages, and that they needed.
It wasn't really an industry then in the Middle Ages, was it?
Sorry?
It wasn't really an industry in the Middle Ages. They hadn't had the Industrial Revolution yet.
Sheep shearing was the only industry. That's what I'm saying. Sheep shearing and making wool was the major industry. Right. And the women who used to sit at the machines were the spinners. And because they were so busy doing that and they couldn't be spared from their jobs to get married, they stayed there for life and became spinsters.
Oh, I see.
Okay?
Is that where it came from?
Yes, absolutely. That's where the word came from.
Well, there we are.
This is how strong it is. Now then, in 1992 in this country we had 44.5 million sheep. Today we've got 23 million sheep. What does that tell you?
It tells me there's less sheep now than there used to be.
There is less sheep, and if there's less sheep, it means there's less grazing. If there's less grazing, it means the country's going to be overgrown pretty soon in areas.
No. So now you're actually leaping, you see, from one particular sheep story to the next part of the story.
No, it's all part of the sheep.
Well, just because there's fewer sheep around, it doesn't mean that there's less grazing. It just means there's possibly less demand for sheep.
No.
People are not eating red meat, therefore they're not eating sheep in as many numbers.
Sheep are natural lawnmowers, right? They keep meadows down, they keep grass in trim, the sheep droppings are incredibly good for the soil and the ground and make it better. England, the landmass of the United Kingdom, is the greatest location for sheep in the world in terms of the natural environment.
Australia?
No, Australia's too hot for sheep. Australia's far too hot for sheep.
What about New Zealand?
New Zealand's not bad.
Lamb is very famous.
New Zealand's not bad at all, but England's the best. The only other place is the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands and the United Kingdom, best places for sheep. Now, there's only 23 million sheep, right? Do you know why? Because young men no longer fancy the job of being a shepherd. They no longer fancy spending long, endless...
Well, because nobody wants to say, when they say to you, what's your job? You go, shepherd.
That's right.
Because it sounds ridiculous.
It's true.
I mean, they've probably got a new word for it,
No, it's
like
true.
Sheep engineer or something,
Something like that. Yeah, but they used to be proudly, walk into the pub in the
Wool
local...
merchants.
Yeah, you know...
Well, I mean, if you met somebody in a bar in London and you went, what do you do? And you went, I'm a shepherd.
I'm a shepherd, yeah.
You'd be going, what?
No, but what I'm saying is that, like Emmerdale Farm, they've got a pub in that called the Woolsack, haven't they?
Well, the Emmerdale Farm show now has got nothing to do with farming,
I know. But what I'm saying is you take a country area...
Did you say the Woolsack?
Or something like that, isn't it?
It's the Woolpack.
Oh, Woolpack, is it? Right. Yeah. The Woolsack's the thing that the
Lord
Speaker
Chancellor
sits on. Lord Chancellor, Speaker sits on a throne. Anyway, listen, the point of the story is, if you go back to the James Herriot era, which was 1930s, these guys who the shepherds were walking around, and they were a great catch for the local girls, you know what I mean? Hey, there's Jack the Shepherd, you know what I mean? And this is big stuff, walking around with their crook.
Red Sky at night, Shepherd's Delight.
And they walked around with their crook, because that was a symbol of their power, I'm a shepherd and all this kind of stuff.
The bigger the crook, the bigger the power.
Well, whatever, and they had a couple of dogs travelling along behind them, old Shep the sheepdog, or his name was. Lassie was the sheepdog.
Unfortunately, that's nearly 100 years ago.
No,
so times have changed. There weren't any cars around.
Anyway, listen, there's a number of reasons. Firstly, so no young men want to be shepherds anymore. That means there's nobody to look after the sheep, right? Secondly... Well,
you said there's still 23.5 million of them.
No, it's 23 million, that's all.
Well, 23 million, that's a lot of sheep.
That's a half number since 1990.
No, but it's still a lot of sheep,
No, it's not a lot of sheep at all. Now, secondly...
Well, you wouldn't get 23 million sheep in this room, would you?
Secondly, farmers and people living in these country, small holdings are getting old, right? They can't move out of their houses because to move anywhere else is too expensive compared to the value of their crumbling old farmhouses. Right. But they haven't got any sheep because they're too old to farm them, so no new farmers are coming in.
Isn't it also to do with the price of lamb? That they can't get the same prices they used to get?
Well, it's not to do that, Mike, but it's EU policy once again. A lot of farmers have just packed up and gone home because they're paid by the EU to let their fields regurgitate.
Yeah, grow fallow,
rewilded. They want them rewilded. The UK...
Funny enough, you're always making fun of me because my house flooded in Wiltshire.
Yeah.
One of the reasons it flooded was that the field behind me was paid for by EU to be fallow. And then the year that they stopped doing that, the guy ploughed it and all the rain ran off it into my backyard.
Right, I see. Well, it's a disgrace.
You're not interested in that at all.
Yes, I am.
I can tell by your reaction. No, listen, I know you well enough. I get some kind of story into your amazing soliloquy here, and you just bypass it like it means nothing. But it's
getting in the way of what I'm trying to tell the nation about sheep. Now, the other thing that you need to know is this. The EU also demand the restoration of peat bogs.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of sheep grazing ground is perfect to be restored. Now, the Peat District, for instance, sways of the Peat District... There are ecologists walking over it every day, designating areas. There's that sheep grazing around. That now must become a peat bog. Right. Now, why we need a peat bog in this country, I have no idea.
Well, I thought this grew naturally.
Peat bogs in Ireland, that's what Ireland's famous for, and they make an industry out of it, and peat's an extremely valuable commodity, and certainly was hundreds of years ago in Ireland, a natural resource equivalent to coal and all that.
You burned it, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right, but we don't need it now. But when you think that the value of sheep in this country goes back as far as Richard the Lionheart, who was once imprisoned by the Saracens. I think that was in 1193, if my memory serves me right.
Really?
And we
you haven't written any of this down.
No. I'm an architect of sorry, not an architect. A student of medieval history, as you know. And we had to get him back for 250 sheep, and they had to be British sheep. We had to put them on a ship and send them over there. They couldn't bring them from somewhere near.
Wasn't that the other problem that we couldn't export any livestock to Europe while the whole kind of mad cow disease thing was going on?
No, it wasn't that. What it was foot and mouth in the early 2000s.
Right.
Like 97, when the Labour government got in, it happened within 2 years.
They were burning loads of
2000, burning sheep and all that, and we've never recovered from that. But the other thing is, Mike, that with all these factors now in place, which I've told you about, sheep in this country could be extinct within 50 years.
I don't believe that for a minute.
Now, I don't mind if the white rhino becomes extinct. I couldn't care less. Because every time I go...
Here speaks a man of compassion.
Hang on. Every time I go for a walk over the North Downs to keep the old ticker in shape, I am not aware of any white rhino.
Well,
okay.
Well, if you're to believe the global warming people, pretty soon you will see a white rhino.
No, you won't.
You see some wildebeest coming over the Epsom Downs.
No, you won't. But I've seen sheep.
Moved.
I see sheep. Now, when I go down onto the South Downs, which is nearer the coast, there's a place down there called Butser Hill, and it's very close to the coast, Portsmouth, that kind of thing. There are sheep all over the grazing hills and all that. They look beautiful.
It's not as if you've noticed that there's no sheep
around, but there are. You go to the Peak District. There used to be a massive sheep area. I've got a friend who lives there who says the sheep are just disappearing. It's like you go to bed one night and there's loads of sheep. You wake up next morning, there are no sheep. Sheep also are incredibly inquisitive. No, if they find a gap in a wall, they push the wall down and they go trotting off to some other field because they like it better over there and all this kind of stuff. That's why you never leave
but I mean, from what
gates
you're
open
saying,
in the country.
you're worried that because there's not enough sheep, that somehow Britain is going to grow into a land of forests again.
Definitely.
Where do you get that from?
Well, I'm telling you, I've done all the research, and sheep, I mean, for instance, when it snows, you have to go and rescue cattle, you have to go and rescue pigs, you have to go and rescue... You don't have to rescue sheep. Sheep are incredibly sturdy and hardy animals who can look after themselves and all that kind of stuff. And they can even graze through snow.
Well, so why are there fewer of them? Are they not...
I've just told you. I've just given you all the reasons.
No, you haven't told me.
There's no shepherds. No young man wants to be a shepherd anymore. You mock that. You've mocked shepherdry. You've mocked shepherdry and said that it's not a noble profession.
It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous job.
It's not a ridiculous job. How skillful is it to be able to round up like a couple of hundred sheep?
Well, a dog can do it.
But how skillful is it to control the? No,
that was a show on BBC. No, ITV. I think it was.
How skillful is it to be able to control the dog that rounds up the sheep? Don't you understand what I'm saying?
Well, you train the dog.
Well, of course you train the dog, but then you've got to use your whistle very skillfully to make sure the dog gets the right commands.
Listen, I don't buy any of this nonsense, right?
Yeah,
because if
true.
if sheep were not reproducing in as many numbers,
it's not nonsense. I've been doing the research on it. It's a major problem.
It's absolute cobblers. If the sheep were reproducing, the sheep don't decide whether or not to have lambs on the basis of, oh my goodness, there's not enough shepherds. Maybe we shouldn't, procreate tonight. Maybe we shouldn't have quite so many babies.
No. There's not enough sheep around to procreate.
There's no family planning for sheep, is there?
Yes, there is. And the family planning is done by the farmers themselves. Really? And if you close down your sheep farm and you haven't got any sheep, then you aren't going to have any baby sheep, are you?
They're not any wild sheep. They're not walking around like in a gang, are they? They're tethered. They're tied to a farm.
Once they send them to market, they don't get any more to fill the gap.
But you still haven't answered the question.
I have answered the question.
If there used to be 40-odd million sheep, why are there only 23? Where have they gone?
I've just explained to you where they've gone.
Where?
There are no farms for the sheep to actually live in because there are no shepherds.
But how do they sheep know that?
The sheep only know that they're put in a lorry, they're taken off to the abattoir, bang, that's it for them. What are you laughing at?
Because there's no logic at all to your argument.
Of course there's logic.
Complete and utter rubbish.
I'm saying that the sheep industry is dwindling at the rate of 50% in 20 years, and therefore sheep will soon be extinct. Everybody's worried about the white rhino in Africa. We don't live in Africa. We live in the UK, which is the world's major sheep location.
So we should be really worried because in 10 years' time there might only be about 15 million sheep left.
You've got it right.
Goodness gracious me. Mike Porky Parry, I don't even know where to begin with that. Coming up, though, we'll hear some more of his theories as well. This is TalkSport. This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Porky Parry. We've got some great texts and emails and tweets coming in on social media messaging. Paul in Birmingham says this, Mike. Mike, tell Mr. Parry he may be a psychopath because of his inability to cry and his lack of empathy, which is something to worry about. Neil in Falkirk says, Mr. Parry, I don't see why we should worry about disappearing sheep. They were the cause of the Highland clearances, and I bet they didn't shed any woolly tears when humans were evicted from their land. And here's one from somebody calling himself Manager. He says, I want to go to night school to train to be a shepherd. I'm sorry. I don't know why it sounds so funny.
Why not? Hang on.
Well, I don't think there are any shepherding classes in night
really?
school, do they?
And what do you think the Cirencester Agricultural College is?
Well, it's a place where you learn how to be a farmer.
That's right.
Not a shepherd.
And what do farmers do?
Well, they're not shepherds, are they?
Farmers employ shepherds to shepherd sheep.
Right.
Okay?
So, all right, well, maybe we'll go down there.
So
and
you
do
can
a bit
learn
of a
how to
course.
be a shepherd at Cirencester Agricultural College.
Excellent.
I know these things.
Now,
There's one in Newcastle
I've also come up with, because of our huge, extensive research department at TalkSport, we've come up with the answer as to where all the sheep have gone from this country. All right, they've all gone to New Zealand. They've all emigrated. There's 60 million sheep in New Zealand.
Well, there always have been.
Well, how do you know that the ones from here haven't gone there?
Well, because they haven't, have they?
Lots of people go there.
Oh, you think the sheep all gallop off down to Calais, do they? Let's get on the ferry over to the continent.
You can't get a ferry to New Zealand from Calais.
And then, well, wherever the ferries to New Zealand go from, you get on a ferry and you go there. But I mean, you know exactly what I'm saying. We should do more trade anyway with the former Commonwealth countries because we had strong trading bonds with them, which seem to have gone. We still see adverts for New Zealand sheep, still see adverts for Welsh lamb and all that. But anyway, I'm finished. I'm fed up with talking about sheep because you, as usual, can't take it seriously, telling me that you've never, been in a wine bar in the West End and met a bloke and asked him his job, and he's, I'm a shepherd from the Peak District or
I bet
Cumbria.
Ben Shepherd. What about him?
Honestly,
all right.
nonsensical.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go back into what you want to talk about, because what I was going to say actually was that Everton did not get the exact result, I suppose you might say, that Liverpool wanted. Now it turns out Liverpool probably have blown their own boat up anyway.
I said they would. I said they would draw against Palace. I actually said I thought that City probably had a good chance of beating Everton purely because they've got such quality players and of the need to get those points.
And you also said it wouldn't be an easy game for City, which it wasn't.
I said it wouldn't be an easy game for City. I also said, but I did predict a 2-2 draw for Liverpool and Palace. But I mean, not under the circumstances that we saw last night. It was unbelievable, the 3-0 and 3-3. But also more importantly, because you won't have got more than one or two right, because you never do. More importantly, there's two big stories I want to talk to you about. Ross Barkley, is he going to the World Cup? Because I know there was some social media activity going on at the weekend. And secondly, Roberto Martinez is in the frame for the Spurs job. Well, I mean, look, let's deal both of these together because they've both got a connection. The connection is the Daily Mirror. Now, Daily Mirror is a fine newspaper established for many years. You were the editor of the Scottish edition of it. You worked for them. That's fine. But now, what I've just heard in the news broadcast is that Roy Hodgson is saying, I've known my squad for some time.
Yeah.
Now, that rather worries me a little bit in relation to Ross Barkley, and I'll tell you why. Because last week, when I realised we were 10 days away from the announcement, I tweeted out, if Ross Barkley's not in the England squad, then I'm going to boycott the World Cup.
Yeah.
It was a light-hearted reference to the fact I thought Barkley should be in. Well, of course I didn't mean it, because I'm not going to boycott the World Cup. Martin Lipton, an very old friend of mine in the world of newspaper journalism, immediately tweeted out and saying, you're going to have some lonely nights, Michael. So he was suggesting that he doesn't think Ross Barkley is going to be in the World Cup squad.
Well, he may be right.
Well, he may be right. Now, the point is, because we've heard in our news bulletin tonight that Roy Hodgson has said, I've known my squad for some time. Yeah. I wonder if Martin has some inside knowledge, which the rest of us are not party to. However...
Was the Mirror also the paper that ran the story about how Hodgson was looking at, possibly leaving out some Man United players because of their form?
I think they have. Well, all the papers ran that, because that was a briefing that the papers had last week with Roy Hodgson. They had a lunch with him. So a lot of the leading... football and journalists from the Sundays, I think you'll find, had lunch with him. But to put all the pieces...
I can't remember what I've read when over this weekend, because I'm getting up so early with a dog at the moment. 5:30 I'm getting up with a dog.
Well, I get up early and not feed my ducks, but I mean, it's good that you're looking
after
the
ducks, okay?
Good that you're looking after dogs. Let me just finish on the football thing, please, before you start getting absurd again. And the point of the story is, if Ross Barkley is not in Roy Hodgson's mind up to last Friday, when I was exchanging social messages, what do we call them? Social networking messages with Martin Lipton. I wonder whether, because he was at the game, he was at the Everton-Manchester City game when Ross Barkley scored what you can only call a worldie.
It was a great goal,
and
I don't like that phrase, I have to say.
I don't actually. I must admit, I'm not going to use that.
To me, it's not a real word.
No, an outstanding goal. You're absolutely right. You're right to correct me on English. But to be corrected on English by you is a real insult to me. But there we go. And what I'm saying is, so Roy Hodgson may have seen that. Now, does that mean Roy Hodgson has perhaps changed his mind and put Ross Barkley in? Because the clamour in the newspapers this morning is all about, you've got to take Ross Barkley. Now, the reason I am dwelling on the Mirror is because in tomorrow morning's Daily Mirror, or this morning's Daily Mirror, my other good friend, I've got loads of good friends actually, but Darren Lewis is a very good friend of mine who works for
He's a very good friend of Talk Sports as well.
Of course he is. He works for the Mirror, and Darren is saying now Spurs set their sights on Martinez. Now, hang on, are the Daily Mirror conducting some sort of campaign against the structure of Everton? Like, don't take their players to the World Cup and nick their manager and get him working for Spurs?
It's more a matter of Daniel Levy casting his net far and wide, because he seems to be picking up anyone that's at all interested in Spurs and suggesting that perhaps they might be the next manager.
Mike, why would Roberto Martinez, in his right mind, go and work for a chairman who makes so many flaky decisions? With the greatest respect to you, Mr. Levy,
he's got more money.
You have made some bad decisions.
To say it's a more ambitious club than Everton.
No, they're not more ambitious club than Everton.
They are.
Utter rubbish.
No, because they want to go somewhere. Everton can't go anywhere because they haven't got any money.
Spurs have got a billionaire backer. That I grant you. But they're not more ambitious than Everton. Everton are terribly ambitious. It's just that we don't have the funds because we've been unable to raise it.
So that's the reason why Martinez would go.
No, rubbish. Martinez loves working at Everton, and he's working for a chairman who has consistently made all the right decisions over the last 12 years.
There's a glass ceiling at Everton.
Mr. Levy has made a number of very questionable decisions.
Well, he may well have done.
Both in appointing managers, in allowing huge amounts of money to be spent on the
average players,
acquiring of players, maybe on ground plans, which 1 minute seem to be going ahead and next minute seem to have stalled. I'm not knocking Mr. Levy. He's a great football administrator, but I would say working for Bill Kenwright makes you sleep easier in your bed at night.
You used to say that about David Moyes, though, and eventually he went somewhere else because he got so far up to the glass ceiling that he couldn't breathe anymore.
So David Moyes is better off as a result of leaving Everton, is he?
Well, Everton are better off. You should be happy about that.
I'm quite happy with our new manager. I was quite happy with David Moyes. But do you think David Moyes is better off after having left Everton?
By about 10 million quid,
by about 3.5 million, I think. But you know what I'm saying. He's not a happy man that he went through
as much as, and I admire your loyalty to the club and I admire your loyalty to the chairman of the club. However, you have to admit that there is a glass ceiling at Everton through which very few people can crash until he sells it to a bigger name funded backer who's going to be able to put some more money in.
You may well be right, but at the same time, he's only had one season there, and therefore, I think you'll give the boy time.
Okay. Now, I know you've been looking at a few books over the weekend.
I do.
You
I was
to
looking
do a bit of that, don't you?
Yeah.
So, what's the latest on a book that you've?
Well, I read book reviews because I don't want to spend my money on books I don't want to read, and I'm a prolific reader. I like walking around Waterstones and W.H. Smith's and all that, and getting. In fact, I found a book of my own in W.H. Smith's.
One of yours?
Yeah, the Alan Brazil
book. Bargain bin?
No. It was back on the shelves, on the sports shelves. Really? Yeah, both barrels from. It was. There's an awful lot of bubbly in Brazil because we wrote two.
I'm surprised because, of course, you remember that I found that DVD of yours in the pound shop.
Yeah, you didn't really.
I did.
No, you made that up. You stole it from
people have
here.
actually started sending pictures in because they found it in the pound shop as well.
No, you nicked it from here and took it and photographed it in that shop. Anyway, this is a fantastic...
You really believe that, don't you?
Yes, I do. Now, this is a fantastic book, this. It's about OCD. Now, do you know what OCD is, Mike?
Obsessive-compulsive disorder.
That's right.
You suffer from it, by the way.
I don't suffer from it at all. Utter rubbish.
Well, you're scratching your shirt even as you speak. You cannot keep still.
Utter rubbish.
I'm a great student of OCD, actually.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you this. This book reveals incredible things. Winston Churchill had it. Winston Churchill...
You couldn't stop drinking whiskey.
Well, that doesn't make him a bad person, in my view. But he had this OCD problem of if he stood on a railway station platform, he constantly had the urge to throw himself in front of a train. So
really?
No, he did, honestly, yeah.
Was that anything to do with the amount of whiskey he was drinking?
I don't know, I'm not sure. And we shouldn't be making light of one of England's greatest statesmen, but he always stood behind a pillar.
Really?
So that he wouldn't have the urge to throw himself in front of the train. George Washington and Chopin, you know Chopin, the greatest pianist ever, or certainly the greatest writer.
Where was he from?
Chopin, Hungary?
Yeah, close, not bad.
Czechoslovakia?
Yeah, no, Hungary's right.
Hungary, right, OK, there you go. So, well, if I got it right, what did you say not bad for? You should have said correct. Because you don't know. Right, now, they both had fears of, and a fear I've got, a terrible fear of being buried alive. No, seriously have. I've left my sister a note, I'm not joking.
Buried alive?
Yeah.
Why would anyone bury you alive?
Well, because they're not sure that you're dead, or they mistook you for being dead, if you see what I mean. My greatest fear...
Well, yeah, you can wake up, it has happened to people in the past, where
they
put them in a coffin and put them in the ground, and then, bizarrely, they kind of wake up
out of can you imagine the terror of that? What would you do?
That'd be awful. I don't know.
Didn't it happen to Uma Thurman in Kill Bill 2?
What?
Kill Bill 2, right?
I can't remember the film that
Uma
well.
Thurman was buried alive, but she got out. But look, I'll tell you more about this because it goes on and on and on. Most astonishing stories I can tell you, but OCD, a terrible ailment.
Yeah.
Obsessive.
Well, you've got it.
Compulsive disorder.
I'll tell you why you've got it coming up next on Talk Sport. These are the two mics.
Today you and I are not the same.
This is TalkSport Extra Time. I'm Mike Graham. He is Mike Parry. Together we are the two mics. There will be a podcast out a little bit later on. Just check it on iTunes. We'll be sending out the link on social media, of course. A couple more texts have come in. This is one from Larry the Lamb. He says, Mike, you're balmy.
I like that.
And somebody else who doesn't give a name says, support the Herdwicks. I don't know who they are.
The Herdwicks, is that some sort of sheep thing?
I don't know.
The Herdwicks might be a strain of sheep.
Football team of some kind. Anyway, listen, I'll tell you why I think you've got OCD. Several clues, because as I told you, I've got a bit of a knowledge about this kind of thing, because I know a bit about ADHD. Yeah, well, because I've had children, so you get into conversations with teachers about whether they've got certain problems or certain, propensities or whatever. You have got a mad obsession about things inside your house. You've got a kind of cleanliness obsession. You've also got an obsession with
What's
wearing...
wrong with that?
Well, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but there's a degree of how serious you take it, right? For example, I've never known anyone that has indoor slippers and outdoor slippers,
Of course I have outdoor slippers. If I take my... Look, if I'm walking outside on my terrace, right, my roof garden, I'll get bits of soil on the sole of my slippers if I use my indoor slippers.
Has it got earth on it then?
Well, no, it's a patio.
concrete?
It's a patio.
Well, how are you
because
going to get earth on them?
Because there's plants all over it in pots and all that, and bits of soil come out and bits of plant come out, and you get them stuck on the bottom of your shoe. I'm going to walk them back into my kitchen, into my lounge, so I have outdoor slippers.
Well, then why wear slippers at all?
Well, what else do you want me to wear on the terrace? A pair of outdoor shoes, which you've got to lace up.
Well, you get a pair of slip-on loafers, or how about those Velcro shoes that you wore into work the other day?
These are slip-on slippers, if you see what I mean. And the reason is because I have to go out and water the plants occasionally and all that kind of stuff. It's quite simple. And
All right, well, explain this then. Why don't you ever let anyone into your house?
I do let people into my house.
You don't?
I do sometimes, but I don't let them into parts of the house. So if they want to... No, seriously.
When I was in your house once, two of the doors were locked.
No, they weren't locked.
They were locked.
No, they weren't locked. It's just that most of the doors I keep open all the time so that the air flows round.
Yeah.
And
Well, there were two doors that were locked.
No, they weren't locked. They're just,
Well, I couldn't open them.
Well, that's probably because they're full of storage stuff and
Really?
all that. I mean, I have...
You haven't got anyone in there, have you?
Part of the OCD we were talking about earlier is obsessively collecting things,
Yeah.
okay? Now, I don't obsessively
Well, you
collect
do a lot
things.
of things obsessively. That's what I'm saying. I mean, you obsessively feed the ducks.
I've got 16 old coats in my house. No, seriously, because they're all still wearable. I just don't want to throw them out. I've got Max and...
Why don't you
and
give them away? I passed a place actually the other day down in Bexhill where you can get £5 for every, I think it's every kilo of clothing that you donate to charity.
Golly, I wouldn't do that. Listen, get back to the OCD, mate, because this is important, right? This ends up with Hans Christian Andersen. He suffered from the fear of being buried alive as well. So he had a note by his bed all the time, I only appear to be dead, in case anybody walked in on him when he died, right? Because I've got this fear that, one day someone will have to break the door down because I haven't been seen for 3 days. Oh, he's dead. And put me in a coffin and all that. And I'm not dead, you know what I mean? So I've told my sister I must be injected with poison before anything else happens.
Poison?
Yeah, in the death process, you know.
Well, why don't you just get cremated?
Well, that's what I'm going to do, but that could be quite painful if you're still alive, couldn't it? Being burnt at 1,000 degrees centigrade.
Well, yeah, but if you're in a state of I don't know, in animation, so that you're not
Well, you'd wake up pretty damn quick if you suddenly had.
Well, surely if you've got a pulse,
1,000-degree flames.
I mean, people used to get buried alive. I mean, so far you've given me historical cases of people being buried alive, and one fictional one from Kill Bill 2. I mean, it doesn't really happen anymore. People don't get buried alive. They have doctors that take your pulse. They have people that declare you dead.
Put a mirror near your nose in case there's any air coming out your nose. But anyway, look, this is Hans Christian Andersen had another problem. He in the days when he lived in like Scandinavia. He lived in Denmark, Copenhagen, lived in Copenhagen.
Really?
Wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen. I always sing that when I go to Copenhagen. Yeah,
You've
I've been
probably
there
been
lots.
there for a football match.
Yeah, I've been there a couple of football matches. I like Copenhagen. It's great.
Very expensive.
It is very expensive. Drink's very expensive. They try to stop you drinking, so they charge you
Well,
double.
they try to stop you drinking.
Well, that's another story. Anyway, the point of the story is Hans Christian Andersen used to walk around with a length of rope wrapped around his waist all the time.
Right.
Because in those days, whenever it was, 1700s or something like that, a lot of houses used to go on fire because they're all built of wood. And so there weren't a lot of fire precautions. So he was terrified of going upstairs in a coffee shop or a tavern or something like that, a fire breaking out downstairs where they bake the loaves and all that, and then suddenly being trapped in a burning building.
I can see you doing something like that. That's
So
the
he
kind of
walked around
behaviour-
this bit of rope so he could tie it to the table and then leap out the window and save himself. I mean,
But that's the kind of behaviour I would expect from you, because you've got all these kind of strange quirks, and I would seriously look into them. I mean, if you've got the book, what I would do is I would read up on it. I would go and find somebody who's an expert in it.
I'm not mad like that.
And say to them, look, I do these things. Does that make me suffer of OCD? Because lots of people suffer from it. Nothing to be ashamed of.
well, it's something like that. In this book, there's a case of a bloke called Kurt Gödel, okay? And listen to this. Kurt Gödel,
Who's
yeah.
he?
Well, I don't know, some kind of philosopher or something. But anyway, listen to this, a ridiculous story. Well, it's not. It's a sad, very, very sad story. Esteemed mathematician, Kurt Gödel, fell victim to an obsession. He'd be poisoned. So he made his wife taste everything that was put on the table for him to
Who
eat.
do you think was going to poison
Before
him?
he eats, I don't know. But don't you think it's a bit cruel that if it was poisoned, his wife would then die instead of him?
Yeah.
But anyway...
Well, there's no point in having somebody taste your food for you if you're not worried about them dying.
Yeah, but get this. The trouble is, she became ill, so I don't know why. We don't know why she became ill, but she became ill. She took
could
to
hazard
her
a guess.
She took to her bed. She couldn't taste his food. He then refused to eat anything until he died of starvation.
That's ridiculous.
I
isn't it?
know, but he was
Story doesn't add
obsessively
up.
compulsive.
It's just madness. Absolute madness.
There you go. You've got to be aware of
Well,
it.
listen, what's the name of the book so anybody might want to read it?
I don't know. It doesn't matter what the book's called. It's just the issue that I worry about.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, well, listen, let me tell you about why I was a little bit frazzled when you got in here earlier on.
Yeah,
because
go on.
the trip up I mean, I've had some bad trips up from Sussex to London.
Bad trip, man.
Yeah, bad trips.
Sound like somebody from the 60s.
Well,
yeah.
you know that for 3 months the trains weren't running at all because basically there was a landslip that happened during the terrible winter that we had, right?
Right.
So they only just finally got the station actually back on the normal train run without having to get a bus, right?
That's
fine.
good.
So that was good. So I got this train at 7 o'clock, which would have normally got me into London Bridge around about 8:15. So I thought that'll be good. I'll be able to listen to the first bit of the game. I'll get home, see the rest of it. You know, maybe even have a chance to have a little bit of a kip
Good
before
planning.
I go into work. You know, have something to eat.
Good
Great.
planning.
I get to the station only to discover the train's only going as far as Tunbridge Wells because there's then going to be a bus service from Tunbridge
Is
Wells.
that near Sevenoaks?
Well, it's not near enough to Sevenoaks. It's
Right.
about another 3 stops down the line from Sevenoaks, right? So I get to Tunbridge Wells. That part of it's fine. Get out. There's thousands of people, right? And most of them are drunk as well. Because the other thing that really annoyed me today, it turns out there was 30,000 motorcyclists on a pilgrimage to Hastings.
Why?
And they were all over the A21. They do it
Why?
every May Day bank holiday. And the noise, and, you know, the noise... I mean,
Dreadful.
I'm normally quite tolerant about
What are all
things.
these drunks doing on a railway station?
Well, they'd all been for a day out, obviously, down to the south coast, and they were now coming back.
And they all got on the sauce all day?
Yeah, absolutely. And they were all smoking and drinking, and some of them had babies. I mean, it was just a horrendous scene, right? Get on this bus, absolutely chock-a-block. There's only one bus for everyone to get on, right?
Yeah.
And it's double-decker. We go about 15 minutes up the road, and suddenly I was watching a movie, actually, at the time, on my iPad. And I was aware of the bus sort of stopping, and I thought, well, this is a bit strange. Why is it stopping? And then I looked up, and the driver was getting out of his driver's cab,
Yeah.
and he was on the phone. And he was looking at the bus, kind of concerned. And people started demanding to get off. And I'm thinking, actually, the bus is going on fire at this point.
Yeah, well, that's what I'd have thought.
But
Yeah,
it didn't actually.
burst into flames. I've
And
seen that happen
loads of people
before.
got off, and he came on and he said, "Look, I'm terribly sorry." He said, "But it's perfectly safe to stay on the bus, but we're going to have to get another one." So I said, "Oh, yeah, great. So a replacement bus service needs a replacement bus." It took half an hour
For another bus to arrive.
to turn up.
So the
yeah.
bus broke down.
The bus broke down. I don't know what went wrong with it, but it just
And then the replacement bus came. Where did that take you to?
So the replacement bus came half an hour later, after standing about on the side of the road. That then took us to Sevenoaks, and we then had to wait another 15 minutes to get a train to London. I mean, it was unbelievable. It took me 3.5 hours
So
for a journey.
where was
that
the
should have
gap in the journey from Hastings to
No,
Sevenoaks?
the gap was from Tunbridge Wells to Sevenoaks.
Right, I
which
see.
isn't actually that far.
Well,
But from
why
the
didn't you
point,
grab a cab?
Well, because, once you're on one of those journeys, I mean, what I should have done was I just should have driven up here.
Yeah,
That's
of
what I
course you
should have
should.
done.
Yeah.
But, I didn't really
Have you
think...
got your new Land Rover yet?
Not yet. I didn't really
Right.
think about the whole kind of, bank holiday
No,
Monday
you didn't
thing.
think really, did you?
Well, because you expect the trains to run. I mean, you
you
were
see, you've
telling
got
me...
no forward planning,
No,
Mike.
well, you were telling me that you were thinking of going to the Everton game at the weekend, but one of the reasons you couldn't go...
I couldn't go.
...was because of all
No
the
trains.
trains.
You
And
wouldn't
I
believe
we
it.
actually want people to tell us about this because you're not going to be here for that much longer, but I want to hear from people because they must be having terrible times getting around on a Monday, bank holiday Monday, absolute nightmare.
Well, bank holiday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? And I left this all to my nephew to sort out. We were going to get a train up to Liverpool and train back. I can't do 10 hours in a car there and back now. And my back, it just gives in. So go on a train, nice first class seat, and table and all that, and walk up and down. Fine. It's only 2 hours anyway. Normally 2 hours 10 minutes. Anyway, no direct trains from Euston up to Lime Street over the May Day bank holiday.
Right.
Alternative route from Marylebone, another station in London, for those who are not familiar with London, to somewhere in the Midlands, like Rugeley or somewhere like that, or Stafford or
4
something.
hours to get there.
And then change there and go to Birmingham New Street or something, and then Runcorn and Liverpool.
Yeah.
I mean, nightmare. 5 hours each way.
I mean, by the time I got back to the place in London tonight, I literally felt as if I'd been going all day. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, you see, what you must do is, Mike, you must have some forward planning in your life. I forward plan all
I
the time.
normally do, but you can't
Well,
forward
it doesn't
plan when
sound
it
to
comes
me
to the
like you
railway
do.
line. So I should have known that the bus that I was going to get on was going to break down, should I?
Doesn't sound... Well, you should have a plan. I always have a plan. For instance, I always get a train an hour earlier or 2 hours earlier than the train I really need to get because I'm always aware of the fact a train
Well,
can
that's
break
because
down.
you've got loads of time on your hands.
Or a train can go
but-
through
well,
engineering problems.
This goes back to you having loads of time on your hands. I don't have loads of time on
I don't
my
have
hands.
loads of time on my
I've
hands,
got lots
Mike.
of people to look after.
I don't have loads of time on my hands. There are things that I have to do in life every day, and every day I'm on the edge. But I plan.
Well, you may be on the edge every day, but you've been on the edge for years.
I plan that. Anyway, listen. As you were down at your country residence on the coast this weekend,
Yes.
what have you done with the wasp nest?
Oh, the wasp nest, absolutely piece of cake, because I got down there and I took some more advice from
Piece
the...
of cake?
Piece
Wasp
of cake.
nest?
Lots of people were warning me, saying, for heaven's sake, don't do it by yourself, don't do the wasp nest on your own, you could get really hurt. And so I got down there, right, and I was all ready to buy my beekeeper's hat, because I was going to make sure that I couldn't get stung. I was going to buy all the...
Must see a picture of that.
I was going to buy all the gear, the spray gear and everything else. And I went into the hardware shop where they sell this stuff, and the guy said, he said, it's very early in the season. He said, if you're actually careful enough, it might be that there's nothing in this nest. It might be that it's been put together.
Well, had you seen any wasps?
Well, there had been a few flying in and out. Yeah, I wasn't worried about maybe 2 or 3 wasps, but what I was worried about was there might be a couple of hundred in there.
Right.
Because it was quite big. And he said, well, what you can do, actually, is you can be very... He said, I don't want to sell you all this stuff. It's quite expensive. You might not need it. He said, take a tennis racket.
Passionate shopkeeper.
Take a tennis racket and tap it a couple of times, because then you're standing far enough back from it. He said, if you can stand outside the shed where it is, tap it with a tennis racket a couple of times and see what comes out of it, right? He said, if a few wasps start
You're
flying
supposed to
out of
put your hand through the window.
Well, no, it was right inside the door, so I could open the door, you see.
Yeah.
And so he said, just tap it a couple of times with a tennis racket, and if nothing happens, or only maybe 1 or 2 wasps come out, he said, just whack it really hard. So that's what I did.
What's the effect of whacking really hard? Smash it to bits?
I smashed it off the roof, right, so
Yeah.
it fell onto the ground, and I just beat it to a pulp with a tennis racket.
Well, there are only
And do
wasps
you know what I
inside.
found? There were no wasps. Do you know what I found?
No.
I found a cocoon. A cocoon which apparently, because I went back to talk to the guy afterwards, contained the queen bees, the queen wasp's eggs. And so what they were doing was they were preparing this nest for thousands of these things, right?
Well, to be, like, hatched from the eggs.
Yeah, so I actually saved...
Sounds grim, that, to me.
I've saved my entire sort of...
I think you have. I think you have.
Ecological situation
And
from
by
being
the way,
obsessed with wasps.
By the way, you're right to warn about this. Now, I became aware over the weekend of something happening. A crazy, literally crazed version of a hornet, about 4 inches long,
Right.
is on its
These
way.
are things from Asia or somewhere, aren't they?
It's on its way over from the channel, from the continent. It's coming across the channel. And believe me, border guards have been told to watch for them. If they come here...
Maybe they're killing all the sheep.
No, don't be ridiculous. But I tell you what, they can kill. They're coming over here, these hornets, right? These killer hornets, and they are deadly, you know. I mean, if you cop one of those, you could be knocked out for 10 days or something like that. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is they attack our bees. Now, if they attack our bees and our bees start getting knocked off...
Because bees are already under threat, aren't they?
Bees are already under threat all over the place. Not enough beehives in this country. We're in danger of all starving to death because if bees aren't...
Why is everything so ridiculously kind of dramatic?
If we are
we're not going to starve to death because there are no bees. We're not going to suddenly turn into a great forest island because there's no sheep.
We could, because...
What sort of world do you live in?
If bees are not pollinating flowers and other plants that they pollinate, the whole food chain, like, for instance, there wouldn't be wheat to make bread, the whole food chain could break down. I'm telling you. I mean, listen, we haven't got Royal Navy anymore to speak of. We could starve to death if suddenly cuts off transport lines of this country. I mean, you don't realise the problems in the modern world.
How do you go from sheep, disappearing to bees, possibly being eaten by giant hornets to having no Royal Navy?
Well, we haven't got a Royal Navy anymore. About 30 ships. We need about 80 to protect our waterways.
Well, it's obvious they've been taking all the sheep to New Zealand and somebody's been knocking off the ships somewhere in the South Pacific.
You're so
Simple.
dismissive.
There's an explanation for everything.
Dismissive,
08717 22 3344. Mike Porky Parry and myself will be on a podcast later on today as the two Mikes. We'll be sending out a link on Twitter, of course. Mike will be back. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Parry. He'll be back on Thursday night for the 3-hour special.